His statement, Armstrong, "Sir, you've got to see these. They're massive. They're threatening. They're threatening us." Wow, this moon is not a moon, okay? It's not your moon in the first place. Actually, this is not your planet. This is their laboratory.
In December 1972, Apollo 17 left the moon. Eugene Cernan became the last human being to walk on the lunar surface. For more than 50 years, the official answer has been simple. We stopped going back because of money, because of politics, because the public lost interest. But there's another story behind this. Hi, I'm Rex. Welcome back to Above Intelligence. Now, let's go into a private conversation years later. In Japan, a Buddhist monk and UFO researcher named Takano Jousen sat across the Eugene Cernan, the commander of Apollo 17, sharing a meal and tea, talking about the moon. Takano was not just a random UFO believer. He was the founder of Cosmo Ailu Hakui, a public space and UFO museum in Japan. He has spent years studying Apollo, NASA, and UFO history. And as someone who have followed these mysteries for a long time, there was one question he could not let go of.
Why did Apollo stop at 17?
Cernan gave him an answer he would never forget.
We were told never to come back again. The message did not come through the radio, my earpiece. It was not mission control speaking. It was spoken directly into my brain, into my mind. It was telepathic.
Takano was shocked.
But why?
Do not interfere with our research. Do not interfere with our activity.
Cernan took a sip of tea and said,
Imagine scientists are working in a laboratory. They are running an experiment, and suddenly a group of monkeys walks into the lab, knocking things over, touching the equipment, and disturbing the work. What would the scientists say?
That's the conversation that happened privately, according to Takano's account. And after Apollo 17, we never went back for more than 50 years. This story is not coming back now by accident. On May 8th, 2026, the US Department of War released the first batch of files under a new UAP disclosure system called Pursue. It was a large archive, more than 160 records, including documents, photographs, and military videos and material connected to the FBI, NASA, and the Department of War and the Department of State. Some of the videos were captured by military sensors, some of the files goes back decades, and some of the most interesting records point directly back to the Apollo missions. To many researchers, this looks like part of the larger disclosure process, and hidden inside that larger release is the NASA files, only a small part of the whole archive, but maybe the most interesting part, because these astronauts were seeing something in space and on the moon. Apollo 11 was the first mission to land human beings on the moon. It was the moment human beings crossed a line that we had never crossed before. Before they even got there, the crew saw something outside the spacecraft. At first, they tried to explain it in the most normal way possible. Maybe it was the SIVB, the third stage of the Saturn V rocket. But Mission Control told them the SIVB was about 6,000 miles away, and the object they were seeing felt much closer. Aldrin said they were seeing all kinds of small objects passing by during different spacecraft dumps, but then one brighter object caught their attention. They looked at it through the monocular, and the shape kept changing, depending on how they saw it. At one angle, Aldrin saw it with a kind of L shape. Collins described it as an open suitcase. Then, when Aldrin looked through the optics, the object appeared to be a cylinder. Armstrong saw it as two connected rings, but Collins saw it like a hollow cylinder. He said it was tumbling, and when it turned end on, you could look right down into it. Then, when they changed the focus on the sextants, the shape seems to change again. Now it looked like an open book. Collins said it was really weird. And Armstrong added an important detail. It was right at the limit of what human eye could resolve. They could not tell its true size or distance. And without the distance, they could not know whether they were looking at a small piece of a debris nearby or something much larger, much farther away. To me, this almost feels like a multi-dimensional object. It crosses space and time. This is what makes this case so important. All of them were trying to describe the same thing. Something was out there with Apollo 11 before they even reached the moon. My questions are, who was behind all this? Were there some ancient artifacts that had been there for who knows how many years? In the Apollo 12 files, phenomenon becomes even stranger. One astronaut looked through the AOT, the Alignment Optical Telescope, a small optical sight used by the lunar module crew, into the dark quadrant and saw small particles of light or flashes moving through space. They seemed to come from behind him, from the left side, and they sailed out into darkness. At first, he thought they might be coming from the spacecraft water boiler, but then his description changes. He said some of those lights looked like they were escaping the moon. And when you looked at the released Apollo 12 images, you can see why this report matters. These are not illustrations, but official Apollo frames with unidentified bright points marked above the lunar surface. The NASA section does not give us a clear mission-by-mission timeline from Apollo 11 to Apollo 17. In this release, the most relevant Apollo records jump from Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 directly to Apollo 17, the final mission to the moon. And it may be the strangest one. At first, the crew saw what looked like debris outside the spacecraft. Bright particles, jagged fragments, flake-like pieces. Some of them were slowly tumbling. One astronaut said it looked like the 4th of July outside Ron's window. But later, they saw something different. One astronaut said he could compare it with closed particles in 3 dimensions, and this object was clearly farther away. He described it as a bright object rotating, and it was flashing rhythmically. The flashes came almost on time. Mission Control and the crew tried to explain it as the SIVB again. Maybe the side of the booster, maybe the engine bell. But the astronauts were not fully convinced. One of them joked that you could not see the engine bell on that thing even if you had 10 binoculars. And Apollo 17 had another strange layer. Not all of the flashes were outside the spacecraft. One astronaut described seeing streaks and flashes while he was trying to sleep. He remembered one flash more clearly than others. A bright point appeared right between his eyes. He said it was like a train headlight coming straight toward him, right between the eyes. A place looked like the third eye. This could be explained as a cosmic radiation interacting with the visual system. Astronauts has reported light flashes in space before, even with their eyes closed. But there's another layer to consider. The pineal gland, located deep in the brain, has long been connected to light, darkness, melatonin, and the regulation of human biological rhythms. So, was this a random neurological effect or a telepathic signal? According to Takano Jousen's claim, it was similar to what Eugene Cernan experienced during Apollo 17, receiving a message directed to his mind. So Apollo 17 was a mission where astronauts encounter strange phenomena both outside the spacecraft and within their own perceptions. An anomaly was no longer just outside the spacecraft. It appeared on the moon itself. One of the astronauts was observing the area near Grimaldi, a large crater close to the western edge of the moon. Then suddenly, he interrupted the description and said, "Hey, I just saw a flash on the lunar surface." He described it as a small, bright flash, almost like a thin streaks of light near a crater of North Grimaldi. Apollo 17 also has a visual material showing unidentified bright points above the lunar terrain. The image itself does not tell us everything, but it adds another visual layer to the Apollo 17 mystery. When you play this inside the larger Apollo 17 record, it starts to feel less isolated. At some points, the question becomes hard to avoid. Were there already aliens active around it? And this is where another controversial testimony becomes relevant. William Tompkins was an aerospace engineer and one of the most discussed whistleblowers in the secret space program community. In the Project Cameron interview, he said that when we got to the moon,
we found out a lot of surprises, okay? The Draco reptilians were already there. We knew because we had probes, non-manned probes, that we sent around the moon. So we knew there were facilities on the backside. We knew a whole lot people didn't talk about. But we were in a position where this moon is not a moon, okay? It's not your moon in the first place. Actually, this is not your planet. This is their laboratory.
According to Tompkins, there were already 9 human groups there. When Neil Armstrong landed,
basically there were 7 huge craft there.
They were parked around the side of the crater, okay? They were not parked on it, they were floating above it.
Okay, yeah.
So there were hundreds of these 9-foot reptilian guys standing with their legs.
Hundreds.
Yeah, they were all the way across underneath their vehicles,
Okay,
standing
so
on the
9
crater.
feet.
now, this is not NASA's official record. This is whistleblowers' testimony, but placed next to the Apollo 17 records, it adds another layers to the story. So, Apollo did not arrive in an empty world, and the moon was never truly our territory. It has been occupied, watched, and protected by extraterrestrial civilizations long before humans ever arrived. Perhaps we will see more official disclosure related to this in the future. Now, after seeing the Apollo records, we come back to the Takano's story. At the beginning of this video, it sounds almost impossible. A warning not to return, sent directly to the mind.
彼の答えは、二度と来るなと言われたって。これイヤホンじゃないですよ。こう脳に直接語りかけてきたって。
Mental download. Never come back again. And any reason.
頼むから、地球人類を邪魔をしないでくれって言われた。私たちの研究なりを邪魔をしないでくれ。
And if what he says is true, then the story of Apollo changes completely. Apollo 17 was not just the last mission to the moon. It may have been the moment humanity reached a boundary that we were not supposed to cross. And maybe they have been watching us for a very long time. And now, after more than 50 years, humanity is finally going back. Artemis II became the first crewed lunar mission since 1972. It did not land on the moon, but it carried out 4 astronauts around the moon and back to Earth. We do not know why we are being allowed to return now. Maybe the situation has changed. Maybe humanity has crossed some threshold. Maybe the rules are different this time. But one thing stood out after the mission. At the press conference, Commander Reed Wiseman described something deeply unusual.
I'm not really a religious person, but there was just no other avenue for me to explain anything or to experience anything. So I asked for the chaplain on the Navy ship to just come visit us for a minute. And when that man walked in, I'd never met him before in my life, but I saw the cross on his collar, and I broke down in tears. It's very hard to fully grasp what we just went through.
In the context of everything we have just seen, his reaction is easier to understand. So, do these files confirm that we are not alone? For many people, including myself, the answer is no longer needs official approval. The real questions are different now. When will the first open contact happen? What is our true history? Why are we really here? And what is humanity's real position in the universe? Based on my research and understanding, the ancient traditions and masters has been telling us we are currently a part of the large-scale human evolution, developing our finest qualities in preparation for the golden era. This could explain the high number of extraterrestrial observers. This release is only the beginning, and as the next releases come out, we will keep connecting the dots to understand the deeper story of human civilization. Because disclosure is not just about UFOs, it's about revealing who we truly are.